This is the weekend edition of Fear and Greed, daily business news for people who make their own decisions. I'm Michael Thompson, and good morning, Sean Aylmer.
Good morning, Michael.
Sean, our weekend show is all about the two of us, each nominating what we think is going to be the biggest business story of the week, the most remarkable business story, the sleeper story, one that's kind of flying under the radar a little bit, and then our favourite business story. It is highly, highly, highly competitive. So we are joined every week by a judge to pick a winner. That judge is our Fear and Greed colleague, Adam Lang. Adam, good morning.
Good morning, Michael. Lucky me, being judge again.
Yes. And you have a set of very strict criteria that you stick to and you never change at all without warning. What are those criteria? What are you looking for today, Adam?
I'm looking for topicality, timeliness, economic impact, some subjective bias, obviously my own, and of course from each of you, quite a bit of melodrama.
Although the worst one is when you kind of decide after the judging that all of a sudden the only thing you're judging this category on is like economic importance. And I've talked about kind of like a meteorite or something like that. And then you're like, well, I don't know what the economic significance of that meteorite was, but Sean's done markets. I'm like, oh, of course he has. Anyway, I'm not meaning to get too kind of bitter. I've had a few wins lately, so I'm going to kind of take the spirit of a champion into this one. Let's go. Biggest story of the week. Sean, what is it?
Markets.
No.
What a setup. What a setup.
Oh, no. Now I've got to rewrite my meteorite story.
Markets. So much going on, and it affects all of us because we have super funds and investments and home loans and saving deposits and credit cards and all that sort of stuff. Plenty of stuff going on in markets this week. Iran had a crack at Israel, meeting the two regional powers who haven't previously directly attacked each other, have. It started on April 1. Israel bombed the Iranian embassy in Syria. Over the last weekend, in retaliation, Iran fired 300 projectiles, including drones, cruise missiles, ballistic missiles at Israel. Two regional powers shooting missiles at each other. That's definitely a crisis, something markets have to worry about. Then we had the US Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell come out and say maybe interest rates won't start falling for a few months because getting inflation lower is proving a tricky task. It follows a run of strong economic data in the US recently. Those comments sent the US dollar higher. The Aussie dollar, for example, fell below 64 US cents. All the Asian currencies fell hugely and have done this year. Equity markets are also down a couple of percent. Bitcoin's lower, gold's higher. And markets, this is all under the markets heading. We also had labour force figures. Sit. Michael, sit. There was 7,000 job losses last month. We found that out this week from the Bureau of Statistics. The unemployment rate pushed up to 3.8%. Still very low, but there's still plenty of punch in the labour market, more punch than the Reserve Bank and the others sought for this point of the economic cycle. That adds to the argument that the Reserve Bank shouldn't lift interest rates. I could go on, but clearly Michael's confected outrage has had an impact on me. And so I won't, but it has been a massive week for markets and investors. Top that, big boy.
Wow, that threw me. Just the big boy bit. Adam, I don't know. I genuinely don't know what constitutes an illegal move on this show.
Yes, I'm sensing a rhetorical question here.
Yes.
Go ahead.
But I'm pretty sure combining so many individual stories, and Sean even acknowledged that they were separate stories. You had geopolitics, you had the US Federal Reserve, you got local jobs, you got equities, you got the Aussie dollar, into one big story breaks the rules.
He's suggesting a deduction.
Yes.
Like a sin bin.
Penalise him. He needs to learn. He's not going to learn if you don't penalise him.
Well, let me take that under advisement.
Thank you.
You prosecute your case.
Okay, I will.
I will. I'll respond at the end of the story.
You know what pains me most is that it was a shame for you, Sean, to risk all your points doing that on what was the second biggest story of the week. It really wasn't worth it because in the end, the story that really got the headlines this week, that we everyday people were talking about, was a head-on collision between big business and politics. All right? So I'm choosing one story here. One. Just one. I'm talking about the Senate inquiry into the supermarkets and specifically the appearances by, well, we had both the Coles boss, Leah Weckett, and the outgoing Woolies CEO, Brad Banducci. But I'm going to narrow it down even further, right, and say it was all about Banducci and Green Senator Nick McKim. Now, the senator was hell-bent on finding out whether Woolies is price gouged.
Hell-bent?
Hell-bent. How about that? Bringing that one back. I don't think it ever really went anywhere. He wanted to know what Woolworths' return on equity, which, as we all know, obviously is net income divided by shareholders' equity, and Banducci didn't know it. What are you laughing at?
As we all know, it's net income divided by shareholder equity. How do you get net income?
Sean, please don't interrupt. The problem here is that I'm in a flow. Once I get going, and you just toss in these little questions and interjections and you throw me right off. So more penalty points, please, Adam. Banducci didn't know, but not that he admitted that straight away. He couldn't recall it, but he didn't acknowledge that. Instead, he dodged the question again and again and again until finally, extraordinarily, Senator McKim threatened him with contempt and the risk of jail. So here, right, is the CEO of one of the most recognisable companies, one of the most trusted companies in Australia, being threatened with jail in federal parliament. So, of course, the story just blew up and the optics on it, as they say,
I think
were
you're
terrible.
about to blow up.
I might be. I'm very excited here. But it overshadowed the fact that both supermarket bosses actually did a reasonable job otherwise. Now, considering, and this is for you, Adam, considering that the Australian retail grocery sector is worth $135 billion, plenty of us hold shares in Woolies and Coles through our super, and we all buy groceries, and we're all dealing with the cost of living crisis. This inquiry into price gouging is a massive story, and this week it really was the biggest story because we may need to reframe the judging criteria for this category in order to go, what were people actually talking about? What was on the front page of the paper? It was this story. This was the biggest story of the week.
Do you reckon that there's a kind of correlation between Michael's excitement intensity levels and the chances of him winning? It's kind of like it's a negative correlation. I'm just
it's like a threat
add.
matrix. The more under pressure he feels, the more animated he can become.
Yes, I think that's right. And this is good.
What I love though is
good theatre.
You two are just sitting there, just so passive and just watching me. And my arms are going everywhere. I'm gesturing to the roof.
Very animated.
You don't want to get too close to Michael on a story like this. It's dangerous.
Okay. So, yes, Sean did start with markets, but really the one story that I thought Sean was focusing on was the labour force figures.
It was not. That was not the case at all. Sorry, please God.
No, the USA inflation figures came out last week. And so really it was the flow on from that and the addition of labour force figures here, which, look, I think it's an incredibly vexing challenge around the world, inflation management and interest rates. I hope that Australia's actually doing it as well as anyone. So I think that was actually a cracking story. The cost of living crisis as it articulated through that Senate inquiry and the Banducci versus Weckett, the Woolworths CEO versus the Coles CEO, I thought that was spectacular and really focusing on the cost of living. It's like that cost of living issue, it was exemplified how political it has become.
Sean, this is happening. It's happening.
No, it's not. I'm calling it a draw because they're both vital stories. They're both big.
Do you know what I loved about that judgment? You talked about how important mine was for interest rates. I didn't use the word interest rates. You said how important it was for cost of living. Michael's story, he did not once say cost of living. Oh. Excellent.
Yes, subjective bias sort of weevils its way in.
This is fantastic. Oh, I have snatched a draw.
a draw from the, what is it? The
jaws of victory?
Yeah.
No. He could never have beaten my story. he look at him grinning. He can't believe he got a draw out of that one.
I honestly can't.
I presume it's a draw because you did penalise me. Is that right?
Pretty much.
Yeah, it's a hollow draw, Michael. No. A hollow draw for you.
Now take it back. I got what I wanted. Now I don't want it. Goodness me. I'm sure there's some kind of fable about that.
Music, song.
Let's move on to most remarkable story, and I'll go first because I've just got a quick little one. for me. Without
Right.
Timer goes on now.
go. This week, we saw a massive commitment of spending on Australia's military, an additional, I think it was $50 billion over the next decade, above what's already committed. There's an extra $72.8 billion in planned spending that's going to be reprioritised. Now, keep in mind that this is all happening at a time when falling iron ore prices are putting pressure on the budget. It is pretty remarkable, then, that we are able to still find all of this money to kind of reprioritise the way our military is. I need to point out a couple of things here. It shows... no, don't yawn. Don't yawn. I just...
You did say it was going to be quick.
And that's why I said I'm going to point out two quick things.
Very well.
Okay. It shows just how... Adam, do I have permission to turn off Sean's microphone?
No.
Okay. Two things. The first thing is it shows just how worried the government is about our position in the region, right? Including what Defence Minister Richard Marles described as the most challenging strategic environment since World War II. The other thing it shows, the fact that we are now kind of putting so much additional money into it, as we learnt this week, it shows just how much modern warfare has evolved beyond our military capabilities and hardware. After all, last year, a Defence Strategic Review found that the ADF was no longer fit for purpose. The extra money is going to be used to help make the Defence Force, quote, more amphibious. Now, I'm sure you are like me and assume that that means they're going to strap guns onto frogs.
It's like sharks with laser beams.
Yes,
That's right.
Yes.
The ultimate amphibious military. Anyway, there's underwater drones, nuclear submarines, news ships, guided weapons, missile defense. We are entering, right, what they are calling the missile age. And this week we learned just how much that's going to cost and just how much we actually need to spend to modernise our Defence Force. And I think all of that put together is pretty remarkable. There you go. It was short. It would have been a lot faster if you hadn't spent all that time yawning in the middle, Sean, and once again, thrown me entirely off my rhythm.
My most remarkable story, Adamski, my friend, the big gambler that you are, the Star Entertainment Group. How can an organisation that is at serious risk of losing its licence to operate the way it has in recent months? I do not know. It is remarkable. The New South Wales casino regulator asked Adam Bell, SC, to undertake a second inquiry into the gaming group to see if it should be allowed to regain its licence to operate a gaming business. Now, the first inquiry basically said, not sure that Star should keep the licence. Actually, I think it said it shouldn't, but eventually an overseer was appointed so it could keep operating. Now, that overseer, his name is Nicholas Weeks. What came out this week was that the chair, David Foster, and former CEO Robbie Cook schemed against him. They allegedly tried to encourage a class action lawsuit against him. They complained that he was being too tough compared to Crown Casino's overseer in Victoria. Emails and text messages tended to the inquiry show that Star executives knew about Mr. Weeks' schedule. They investigated who he was meeting, etc. Now, I loved Mr. Weeks' reaction when it was all put before him at the inquiry this week. He was sort of surprised. He said, I thought we had a strong working relationship. Anyway, clearly not. He also said governance at the casino has improved modestly. Ouch. Hardly a ringing endorsement. There are also stories this week of cash dispensing machines giving out millions of dollars for free, some to problem gamblers. Also stories of Mr. Cook trying to hide the true financial position of the company from other executives and Mr. Weeks. The group's share price hit a record low, although billionaire pubs owner Bruce Matheson has been buying in. I just think it is absolutely remarkable that a company so very close to losing its right to operate just keeps operating the way Star operated. It is, I don't think Star will survive. I don't see any way it can survive in its current form. Perhaps it gets a new owner. Remarkable. Adam.
Yeah, stunning. And, I think there's a link between these two, gambling and taxes.
Oh, God.
Here he goes.
Stop there.
Here he goes judging it on stuff we didn't say.
I think he's trying to say that we need more gaming to increase taxes to spend on defence.
Well, that's the link, isn't it? But
Indeed,
I
it is.
think
Tenuous at best.
yes. The defense story is certainly very big. I just don't know that it tips the scale to remarkable. Whereas the implosion at Star Entertainment, to me, is absolutely remarkable. Just when you thought it could not get any worse, for days this week, we have seen it get worse and worse. It's just incredible. So, Sean, you win for the remarkable story of the week.
Do you reckon I'll win by like 1 point? Because do you remember last week there was some story that you just absolutely
I hammered you on.
No, you hammered Michael on.
Oh, yeah. Avocado, the superfood. He claimed it as news.
Yeah, and you're just like, that's not news, and mine was a good story. You know, the point's different, listeners. It was 1 point.
Yeah.
And I'm like, come on.
Yeah. Oh, can I just say the biggest outrage of last week was when Adam then showed us the judging sheet, the little scorecard where you kind of do the points for each of them. In one of the categories, I only got a 4 out of 5 for melodrama.
Yeah, you left a bit in the tank on that one.
I
Michael.
didn't think I did. I thought, yeah, I've got to wave my arms around a bit more. Okay, so what are we now? 1.5 to half.
Yes.
All right, let's take a quick break. We'll come back in a moment and find a sleeper story of the week. All right, Sean, we're looking for a sleeper story of the week. A sleeper story is one that's not getting the attention that it deserves, that we feel it deserves, or is kind of flying under the radar a little bit. Who knows if Adam's going to agree with us on this one. Would you like to go first on this one?
Yes, righto. So my sleeper story.
He's right out of the blocks on that one, isn't he?
To be honest, in my mind, I was thinking about the conversation we had during the break. And like the absolute abuse that you and I started flying at Adam over his judging thus far this morning.
Yeah, I made the point again that I didn't want Sean sin-binned in the first category if I was going to legitimately get a draw, because I don't want an asterisk next to my name for that.
Yeah, I mean, the point of that is that you illegitimately got a draw because I got sin-binned.
Well, it's legitimate because you did the foul. Anyway, sorry, go on.
Sleeper story. Look, protectionism is creeping back, and that isn't good. The Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, doesn't think recent initiatives under the Future Made in Australia banner are protectionist. Instead, the government's policies are about de-risking projects to attract private capital. But it is all just semantics. In an interview with the Financial Review, former Productivity Commissioner Gary Banks joined all his successors, including incumbent Danielle Wood, in condemning the government's policies of loans, grants, subsidies and investment incentives as they return to protectionism. Mr. Albanese said Mr. Banks didn't understand the policies in full nor appreciate their objectives. He likened Mr. Banks to a flat earther, whom I haven't heard about a flat earther for many, many years. So I'm pleased Albo's bringing that one back. For decades, right, protectionism was bad. Then COVID came along. We had all these supply chain problems. It became less bad. There's actually plenty of reasons to support what the government is doing. One being that everyone else is doing it, like the US's massive Inflation Reduction Act, its push to up tariffs on Chinese steel announced this week. They're all protectionist. You just can't argue otherwise. They're also very political. So I'm not saying the Albanese government shouldn't do them, but they should be called what they are, and that's protectionism. Free market economists hate trade barriers. In a perfect free world with the flow of capital and goods, protectionism is bad. But the world isn't free and easy. We get that. In fact, it's much less free and easy post-COVID, post-Trump, post-Xi Jinping for that matter. I don't really like the idea of picking winners because that's what the government's trying to do, saying in some areas we are going to put money into it because we think there are areas we should. You can spend plenty of taxpayer dollars with little result. But I do understand why it's being done. In the long run, these sorts of policies aren't good for business and they're not good for the economy. So I just think this creeping protectionism is a real problem. Dull, worthy, Defence Force style. Michael, over to you.
I really just don't know whether major government policy, one that I spoke about last week as my biggest story of the week, could really be considered a sleeper story this week. But I'm sure Adam can sort this one out.
He'll find something in there.
Let me tell you about a real sleeper story instead. And that's the fact that about 3 million Australians, that's a lot of people, are about to be hit with a massive increase in the amount that they owe to the government. HECS debts are going to be indexed to inflation again in June, and we found out this week that that increase is going to be around 4.5%. Now, this is a sleeper story because HECS help debt in the era of high inflation is uncharted waters, really, for a lot of people. Sure, they got a little taste of it last year with the highest ever indexation of 7.1%,
Hold on.
But
Protest. Do you hear what you just said?
I heard what I said. I know what I said, and I'm standing by it. For so long, inflation was low, the indexation therefore was low, and nobody really noticed. Well, they're noticing now. And it's a sleeper because, Adam, pick up your pen, please, write this down. It may actually prompt changes to the indexation. The Prime Minister said this week that the government needs to do better among younger Australians and that they are considering altering the way that those HECS debts are indexed against inflation. So for 3 million Australians owing around $75 billion, this is going to be a big, big story. But for now, it's still a sleeper. And if I may offer an assessment, a very good one at that. A good story.
Right. So sleeper-wise, Michael, as you mentioned, it happened last year. Did it happen every year before that?
Well, indexation, yes.
But will it happen every year to come?
Possibly.
I suppose we'll see. My point is it's not quite a sleeper in that we know it's on the calendar. So I'm sorry, you can't win on that count. Now, however. What first happened here with Sean's story? You can just imagine this, Sean, when you started talking protectionism, I nearly had a tear in my eye, a tear of joy. And when you've got the Productivity Commission as an entity in this country, and present servants and past are all saying, don't do this. It's too high a cost for political favour. And yet it's being entertained for political reasons. I think this is a massive sleeper story. So I have to give this one to you for the week.
Look, I no, you know what? But the thing is,
you're stuttering a lot at the moment, Michael.
No, I'm not arguing for points. I was actually just clarifying on the story that I'm aware that it has been happening for a long time, but not in the era of high inflation. And so therefore, this is why it is significant, because now that people are being hit with this.
It happened last year.
But they weren't talking about changing the system last year.
Moving on, Sean wins.
But let's go to our favourite story. Now, Michael, time.
It's been a while since we've had a story about planes in the favourite story. It's been a while since we've had a bit of a drought, a plane drought. That ends today. It ends right now, because this week we had an incredible story about the efforts that airlines are making to hit net zero, and that includes decarbonisation of supply chains. To help with this kind of lofty goal, Qantas has joined an alliance of organisations called the Aviation Circularity Consortium, which is just the most meaningless and dull name that you can imagine. What it should have been called is the Jet Recycling Club or something like that.
Yes.
They should put me in charge of naming things. Jet Recycling Club, the Aviation Circularity Consortium. They are going to try and create value from the 8,000 end-of-life retired aircraft sitting in open spaces around the world. It's going to hit 11,000 in the next decade. Qantas says that 90% of an aircraft is capable of being recycled and used in the manufacturing of new products, new parts to go in their planes. And I really quite like that.
Is it like sort of like, here's a wing, shove this wing on? That sort of stuff?
Yeah, look,
this'll do.
I'm sure it's not, but I like to picture that it is. And you know why I like to picture it is? That they actually take individual parts of a plane and just jam them into a new one. because there are some really cool planes just sitting there in the desert. One of them, for instance, in the New Mexico desert, has been there for the last 40 years, not doing much. It is just sitting there. The private jet of Elvis Presley, just sitting in the New Mexico desert. A collector bought it last year for, I think, $260,000 US. I reckon he probably got a bargain, right? Now, he might turn it into a museum. He might cart it away. He might do something. But just imagine for a moment, if you will, if Elvis's plane ended up in the Aviation Circularity Consortium and was recycled, and all of a sudden you're sitting there on your Qantas flight on a nice new 737, heading from Melbourne to Sydney, having a little snack, maybe a cup of tea. You put your tray table down. It's got the initials EP in the corner, recycled from the King's jet, along with the red velvet upholstery. There was red shag carpet as well in this jet. Imagine that carpet in the first class part of an A380. The opportunities here are endless. And that's why this is my favourite story of the week, because of the green future of aviation and also, just for a little bit, of Elvis Presley's jet. There you go.
Red shag pile carpet.
I know, how good. Like, you look at the pictures of this jet online and it's just like, how was that allowed to sit there in the desert for as long as it was? So someone owned it and they just didn't do anything with it, and then they resold it again. And I just think people buy it and go, yeah, I'm going to do something with this. And then they realize it's actually probably kind of hard. But it's just like, it's all sun faded, and then you go inside and like everything is in like mint condition. And you're like, this is cool. Anyway,
Very good.
I'm getting distracted.
My favourite story of the week, I love how much change has been in the workforce over recent years, highlighted this week by the story that millions of workers could soon have the right to double their annual leave by taking it at half pay. The Australian Council of Trade Unions and employer groups are reportedly close to consensus on introducing the right into industry awards to give staff and firms greater flexibility to allow for paid time off. The unions and employers have agreed that the right to request should lie with the employee. So the employer can't tell people to do it. The difference at the moment is kind of around the finer points. The employers want full discretion to say no. The unions say, well, there's got to be a good reason to say no. They'll argue that one out. But what a great idea. You know, like for years you worry about school holidays for the kids. How are you going to sort out the kids during school holidays? You know, you need to go to Europe for a couple of months, for example. No problems. Need to spend time with ageing parents? Absolutely. I think this is a fear and greed concept. I think we should introduce it. Michael, I think you're on my team here. We can ask the judge himself, the great man, the grand poobah, Adamski, can we do it? Can we have double leave on half pay? Because some of us want to travel.
I reckon we could.
No.
Oh, sorry.
No.
So who's got the young kids here, eh?
No, I'm putting my foot down. I don't like where this is going. You've chosen a workplace story, and you know Adam loves this stuff. Just finish and win. Adam?
Well, I mean, it is wonderful reform, isn't it? Now, Michael, one question for you on the Elvis jet.
Yes.
You know, would they have left a small affectation, like a menu for his catering on board? And I was just wondering if they did, would it have the infamous Fool's Gold loaf on the menu? Have you heard that story? What one of Elvis's favourite meals?
No.
Okay, the Fool's Gold loaf. And he often used to travel, I think, on this jet just to go to this restaurant. So it is a entire loaf of bread hollowed out, and then inside it you stick an entire jar of peanut butter and a jar of jam and about half a kilo of bacon. And then you deep fry it. And then you eat it. It is quite an incredible meal.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
He didn't always look that healthy, Elvis, I've got to say.
He worked at it.
No disrespect to the big fellow, the king.
And, well, the challenge was to eat an entire one. And apparently that was one of his things. Anyway, I have to say on this story, favourite story, of course, reform wins. Sure.
God, you're boring,
I
Adam.
love recycling plain parts. It's like amazing that it hasn't happened already. But yeah, look, I love it. I love the idea of people being able to flex how they want to use their leaf. So I think it's a terrific story. Well done, Sean.
3.5 to half and a big asterisk around your half, Michael.
That has got to be. Oh, can I have the points,
One
please?
of the biggest drubbing. Sean,
Yeah.
geez, there was a couple of perfect scores here. 97.
Oh, PB.
Holy hell.
PB.
Yep. And Michael, 91.
See, 91 on an ordinary week would not be the worst score in the world.
No.
But compared to a 97, which makes me think there is some kind of collusion.
Look at it. Look at what he's done. He's kind of like the perfect scorecard, really. Reform for favourite, protectionism for sleeper, just the debacle at Star Entertainment in Remarkable. And then the biggest one is really those labour force figures, which is just incredible.
Yeah, look, this has all the hallmarks of total BS. I'm just saying. I graciously accept the decision of the judge.
And call it BS.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. Thank you very much, Adam.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, Sean.
Thank you, Adam. And you too, Michael.
Make sure you're following the podcast and please join us online on LinkedIn, Instagram, X, Facebook and TikTok. I'm Michael Thompson and that was Fear and Greed. Have a great weekend.